You're listening to Savory. It's about the people and processes behind food production and the politics that shape our understanding of the food system. I'm your host, Marika Dunham. On this episode of Savory, we are going to dive into the relationship between our diets and our health. This episode is not about what foods are healthy or how you should be eating. This episode is about why we are collectively obsessed with healthy foods. A large portion of food culture in North America today is centered around health discourse. Conversations about healthy foods are most often rooted in a nutritional science understanding of food and a Western understanding of health. The field of nutritional science emerged in order to understand the properties of food that are essential for life. Throughout the 20th and 21st century, nutritional knowledge about food has radically transformed medical practice, the food industry, public policy, and as a result, people's diets. There are two parts to this episode. Part 1 explores what it means for nutritional science to be a dominant cultural way of knowing food. And Part 2 examines how food has become a tool for individuals to optimize their health. Part 1. Hegemonic Nutritional Practice. Nutritional science begins to unpack the complexities of food by breaking food down into its nutrient composition. For the sake of isolating variables and providing correlation or causation data, many nutritional studies examine food at the level of nutrients. There are two main categories of nutrients: energy-yielding macronutrients. This includes proteins, lipids, or what we call fats, and carbohydrates, and essential micronutrients, which we often refer to as vitamins and minerals, both of which are necessary components for the metabolic reactions to occur in a cell. During insufficient macro and micronutrient intake, basic cellular processes are compromised, leading to deficiency-related diseases and conditions like scurvy. For much of the 20th century, nutritional science was focused on isolating and discovering nutrients and characterizing their role in cellular processes, and thus their role in the promotion or prevention of disease. Investment into this scientific model of knowledge production led to incredible advances in the health sciences. During the 20th century, life expectancy grew from 47 years to 77 years, and at the same time, the knowledge that diet was a major determinant of health and chronic disease became prominent information. The focus of public health nutrition for the earliest 20th century was to ensure a safe and reliable food supply and adequate nutrition for all. Post-World War II, medical and nutritional research shifted from the contagious diseases to the chronic ones, like diabetes and cardiovascular disease. By the 1970s, cultural shifts moved eating habits towards the center of health discourse. Health was redefined around lifestyle and reconceptualized as largely within personal control. As diet took center stage in the average American's pursuit of health, nutritional science worked hard to inform consumers about what nutrients and what foods were really healthy. Nutritional science studies food at the level of the nutrient in order to unpack the health properties, good or bad, of certain foods through quantifiable measurements, like the amount of calories and vitamins. While nutritional science inquiry is important for understanding the role of certain nutrients in cellular processes and thus human health, this type of scientific inquiry and understanding is simply one way of knowing food. Food scholar Georgi Skszwx argues that this nutrient biochemical level of engagement with the body is overly reductive and tends to displace and undermine other ways of knowing food. He argues that nutrients, like proteins and vitamins, and biomarkers, like cholesterol levels and body mass index, are decontextualized from foods, diets, and bodily processes. This decontextualization works to create standard food-body relationships and objective scientific knowledge about food, nutrients, and health. Reducing food to its nutrient composition for the purpose of understanding how food impacts the health of the body is a nutritionally reductive approach. According to Skszwx, nutritionally reductive approaches happen at many levels. The first is health reductionism, reducing food to its effects on bodily health. This obsession with healthy foods like kale, chia seeds, and avocados may come at the expense of embedded sensual, cultural, or ecological qualities of food. The second is food level reductionism, decontextualizing single foods from diets which create superfoods like avocados and foods that are vilified for their nutrient profiles, like ultra-processed snack foods. And the third is nutritional reductionism, which involves identifying nutrients and their relationship to health and then furthering the specifics. So identifying fat and then differentiating between different types of fat. The multiple levels of nutritionism work together to standardize the scientific understanding of nutrients and their relationship to bodily health. A calorie is a calorie and a vitamin is a vitamin, regardless of its food origin. The decontextualization of nutrients from foods, foods from diets, and diets from larger social and cultural contexts is prominent in nutritional advice. An example of this is the mandatory nutrition panel on the back of packaged foods and its relative size and location compared to the ingredients list, which upholds this idea that a nutrient level analysis of food is superior for determining the health properties of that food. By isolating variables and examining food at the level of nutrients, scientists attempt to produce objective scientific knowledge about the health properties of foods. Objective, quantifiable data, like the amount of and types of fats in, let's say, fast food burgers and fries, is a lot more concrete than subjective experiences, like how one person might get a tummy ache after they eat those burgers and fries. But there's a type of nutritional practice that uses solely this type of quantified nutritional information about food to understand and communicate what healthy food is. Two of my favorite food scholars, Jessica Hayes Conroy and Allison Hayes Conroy, call this hegemonic nutrition, which can be characterized by three central assumptions. The first is that food-body relationships can be standardized, like through the unit of a calorie. The second is that nourishment can be reduced to macro and micronutrients. And the third assumption is that nourishment is universally equivalent, and because of this, it can be decontextualized from the political, economic, socio-spatial, and cultural locations from which it takes place. This type of nutritional practice reproduces an understanding of health that is rooted in Western scientific ideologies. Health is viewed as something that can be measured and managed. Health is decontextualized from other social and cultural contexts and standardized into quantified ideals, like body mass index, cholesterol levels, vitamin levels, glucose levels. The reduction of health to numbers works to create objective knowledge defining what a healthy body is, like a BMI between 18.5 and 24.9, and what a healthy body is not, like a BMI over 30. Just to put in a quick side note here, BMIs are very problematic measurements because they do not differentiate between different types of body mass, so a very muscular person is going to have a larger BMI. But the point here is that BMI is a method that science and the medical community has used to try to quantify health previously. According to Skszwx, our bodily functions and requirements take a form that can be readily commodified, scientifically and professionally managed, and technologically integrated. By counting calories and controlling bodily cravings, individuals are expected to achieve optimal health through the project of nutrition. This conceptualization of health as strictly physical properties and quantities does not take into consideration the cultural, spiritual, emotional, mental health, or well-being of the individual. This way of knowing food and the role of diet as a determinant of health is in and of itself a cultural way of knowing food. This type of nutritional rhetoric privileges this Western scientific way of knowing over other ways of knowing. This privileging of quantifiable and thus seemingly objective data in nutritional practice works to conceal Western scientific knowledge production as value-free. But the value placed on scientific nutritional understandings of food creates an inherent power imbalance in nutritional practice where those in the know, like dietitians, work to inform the uninformed other, or at-risk populations. In this way, nutritional knowledge is anything but objective. Nutritional knowledge is embedded within the value systems and power relations of the institutions that produce that knowledge. To bring it all together, the decontextualization and standardization of nutritional advice privileges scientific ways of knowing. And this scientific way of knowing food and understanding food-body relationships is a dominant cultural way that we know food. Which leads me to part 2. How food is thought of as a tool to optimize our health, and how this kind of decontextualized nutritional advice that's independent of cultural ways of knowing perpetuates complicated and confusing advice for the consumer. Part 2. Food as a tool for neoliberal governmentality. In the first episode of Savory, we explored a brief history of the modern food system. Parallel to the modernization and industrialization of the food system was the rise of an economic ideology called neoliberalism. Ushered in by a conservative political movement in the 1980s, under the leadership of Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan, the central tenets of neoliberal economic ideology is, first, the belief that free markets are the optimal way to distribute all of society's resources, and as a result, second, is limiting most forms of government because of a skepticism of the efficiency of government intervention. This led to the privatization of social health services that were traditionally provided by the welfare state, which means the responsibility of the provisioning for healthcare was downloaded from the state to the individual. So, neoliberal economic theory supported the notion that health was a commodity delivered within a market context instead of a right for all people. In this way, neoliberalism really changed the way that people had to navigate their own health, because it was their responsibility to buy privatized health insurance in order to get access to healthcare instead of having healthcare provided to them by the state. At the same time that neoliberalism was privatizing healthcare, the knowledge that food was a central determinant of health became central in health discourse. The prevalence of health consciousness in North America today can be rooted in a movement called healthism, which began in the 1980s and, as it stands today, is a means of vigilant self-improvement for the sake of obtaining health. Healthism uses ideologies of self-improvement, which was very beneficial for reallocating the responsibility of healthcare from the state to the individual. And healthism fully embraces diet as a means of achieving health. The healthism movement has also been quite beneficial for food companies that capitalize on health as a commodity and something that individuals can purchase, as individual consumers have demanded change in the food industry to support a health-centric lifestyle. An example of this might be a store like Whole Foods or Trader Joe's. Neoliberal government policies utilize healthism and nutritionally reductivist rhetoric to download responsibility to the consumer. So this concept we were talking about, hegemonic nutritional practice, which is just practicing nutrition independent of the culture and socioeconomic reality that a person lives in, it's co-opted by the food industry to perpetuate really confusing dietary advice. Nutritional advice frequently suggests eating less of certain nutrients instead of certain foods. For example, eat less fat instead of eat less meat, which is a source of saturated fat. This is mostly due to powerful lobbying from food industries because eat less meat could mean less profit for large food corporations. In today's neoliberal landscape, food is an opportunity for profit. Food corporations have capitalized off of nutritional rhetoric using nutrients instead of ingredients to promote their foods. Packages market health claims based off of one prominent nutrient in the processed food product, failing to examine the whole product. An example of this is food packages saying high in fiber. In this way, food companies are able to label processed foods as healthy and sell health as a commodity in a supermarket. In a lot of ways, health is something that is viewed as a central tenet of good citizenship and a good life. A healthy person is thought to be more economically productive and people who are contributing to the economy are thought of as better citizens. We can think of citizenship as the set of practices that allow a person to participate in the decision-making of their community. Citizenship exists within a social, political, cultural context that defines the power relations of a community. So, in the neoliberal state, participation in the market is central to citizenship. This has led to the rise of something called consumer citizenship, which we can think of as the concept of voting with your fork or your dollar. In other words, using your consumption to change the market by purchasing products from brands or companies that you ethically agree with and want to support. This type of consumer citizenship creates a moral imperative for individuals to purchase and eat healthy foods in order to maintain what is considered a healthy body for the sake of being or becoming a productive citizen. Our ideas about what a healthy, productive, rational body looks like are informed by interlocking social, political, and cultural systems. There are codes of respectability that shape narratives and understandings of appropriate behavior and, as a result, appropriate bodies. Respectable bodies are thought of as very clean and in control. For example, in corporate and academic workplaces, it is essential to conceal any bodily fluids or messy materiality. Things like runny noses, farts, or menstrual stains are highly inappropriate because they violate the unwritten rules that govern respectable behavior. We also tend to talk about bodies that are athletically fit as being more respectable and productive, because being fit is thought of as a mark of a person's ability to be in control of their body and manage their time well. The construction of an idea of what makes a respectable, productive, rational, fit, healthy body requires the construction of an other, of an irrational and unproductive body. Bodies that are fat are thought of as to be lacking control. Fatness is associated with laziness and a lack of productivity or motivation. Currently, within this capitalist and neoliberal system, respectable bodies are productive bodies, and individualist ideologies prevail as notions of success. Food becomes a tool that individuals can use to optimize their health. Bodies that are in control, making healthy choices, are viewed as productive, rational, and even valuable. The dominant cultural understandings of healthy foods is rooted in nutritional science. Because of the nutritionally reductive approach that is pretty inherent in hegemonic nutritional practice, nutrition becomes a tool that neoliberal policy can utilize to download the responsibility of health to the individual, because standardized measurements, like calories and BMI, can easily be managed privately. For example, in the US, health services refocus their efforts to provide information to the public about making healthy choices, like Michelle Obama's Let's Move campaign, instead of directly providing access to healthy food or health care. This places the responsibility of eating well and sourcing healthy food onto the individual. For an individual to manage their health through maintaining a healthy diet, they need to be in control of their bodily cravings and desires. Within this particular mode of thinking, a slice of chocolate cake is an indulgence, a sweet tooth that must be managed. Eating a brownie is viewed as caving in and lacking willpower, rather than a pleasurable experience. A body that is in control is viewed as rational, ordered, and even civilized. In this system, a person and the value of their life and their body is contingent upon their actions and abilities. Bodies that fail to adhere to this ideal of health are deviant and out of control. People who are chronically ill, overweight, out of shape, are viewed as burdens to the healthcare system and less economically valuable laborers compared to their healthy citizen counterparts. Even the language out of shape implies that there's a proper shape for a body to be in, and it's the individual's fault if their body is out of that shape. This conception of health as a measurable physical state of the body is very problematic. This conception of health as something that is entirely within personal control obstructs the systemic inequalities and power dynamics of a person's social, political, and economic reality. What kind of job someone has, where they live, what kind of transport they have access to, what kind of food they have access to, how much formal science education they have, whether they were taught to cook from their family, all of these social and economic factors of a person's life influence the complexity of their ability to be healthy. In this system, an individual's access to health, both health care and healthy foods, is dependent upon their ability to pay for it. Requiring health as a tenet of good citizenship without directly providing a means of accessing healthy food or health care highlights the inequities that are inherent in this neoliberal capitalist system. The idea of choice on the market distracts from larger power relations. The experience of an ability to read a nutrition label and interpret scientific information about the healthfulness of foods is dependent upon an individual's level of education. Within North America, institutions of higher education remain exclusive and exclusionary spaces. Access to nutritional information, like the Let's Move campaign, is one thing, but the ability to incorporate this information into daily life is another. So to recap all of this, the responsibility of healthcare is now on the shoulders of the individual instead of being on the shoulders of the welfare state. And the rise of consumer citizenship has resulted in people seeking to take charge of their health through their diet. This cultural understanding of food as a tool for achieving health is rooted in a Western scientific conception of physical and bodily health. In this way, neoliberal commodification of health is deeply interconnected with the commodification of food and our cultural understanding of the relationship between food and health. Hegemonic nutritional advice is co-opted by nutritional policy, which ignores larger systemic realities and implicates the consumer as primarily responsible for their own health. And, as a personal note, for anyone who needs to hear this, your value is not contingent upon your ability to be productive. It is radical to love your body as it is, and to know that you are inherently worthy of love, care, and respect. There are many pressures shaping narratives of proper consumption and respectable bodies. Be critical of them. Who benefits from the narrative of productive bodies being valuable? Who benefits from the narrative of healthy foods being essential to good citizenship? Who benefits from a privatized healthcare system? Who benefits from thinking of health as more than quantifiable biomarkers, of thinking of health as spiritual, emotional, and mental well-being? Who is at the table when we have conversations about our diets, our bodies, and our health? Who writes healthcare, economic, and food policies? Where are they from, and what disciplines were they educated in? It is impossible to detangle a person from their political, cultural, social, and economic realities, where and how someone was raised, an individual's race, class, gender, education, shape and inform the ways in which we know food. In the current North American food system, food is really decontextualized from its origins, and consumers are removed from the realities of food production. This results in a very interesting power dynamic paradigm, where at the same time that consumers are removed from the realities of food production, they are morally implicated to care about food, specifically to utilize food as a tool for achieving health. Dominant cultural understandings of health and healthy food are rooted in this hegemonic nutritional practice, which values a Western scientific conception of health as bodily, physical, and within personal control. According to the agendas of some alternative food networks, individuals should care, and thus purchase food accordingly, not only for their own bodily health, but for the health of others, and for the health of the planet. The very narratives that empower consumers to change the food system through market participation disempower individuals whose socioeconomic reality limit their market participation. Individuals who are low income or experiencing food insecurity, as well as individuals lacking the formal education to be able to engage critically with nutritional science. By gaining distance from the everyday, we are able to better examine and situate our daily rituals and realities in the world. We can see how current public discourses about nutrition and the food system are situated within a specific cultural, social, and historic moment in time. We are able to explicitly examine how value systems like neoliberalism and capitalism shape our current food system and daily realities. By explicitly highlighting this otherwise invisible social architecture that's governing our lives, we are able to begin to critique and question the norms of our food system and the common sense of our society. This episode of Savory was created on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Squamish Nation. I am deeply grateful to have had the opportunity to live, work, and learn on this land. Thank you for listening to and supporting this project. I hope that it inspires you to think critically about our food system and listen openly to the perspectives of others. Creating a podcast is a highly collaborative endeavor. Financial support for Savory came from the Quest Research and Scholarly Works Committee. Savory was produced, recorded, and edited by myself, Marika Dunham, under the guidance of the incredible Dr. Emma Davy. Original music is by Cameron Lee. You can find his work at eelromance.com, and graphic design is by Jessica Matyas. You can follow her work at Matyas Creates on Instagram. I would like to extend a special thanks to Dr. Melanie Bador and Dr. Elizabeth Lee for the critical theory that informed the production of this episode. I learned a lot from taking their classes at Quest University, and it has really inspired me to produce this work for you guys. I hope that you found it informative and enlightening and empowering. There's a lot of cool critical theory out there, and I really encourage you to explore it.